Welcome to Your Health is Your Wealth. My name is Argo Duenas, and I'm your host for today. I'm also the owner of Back to Nature Health and Wellness Center located here in Annapolis. We offer a variety of holistic services and have served the Baltimore, D.C., Virginia area for over 30 years. The mission of this show is not only to provide health and wellness information, but to also present positive images and inspiring interviews. Well, you're in for a treat today. I have as my very special guest today, Miss Latoya
Nkongolo.
I always got to get it right.
I'm so
always
used to it.
Always got to get it right. Nkongolo, right?
Right.
Latoya is a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed clinical drug and alcohol counselor.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yep.
And I'm so happy that you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
You know what? I was so inspired and moved by your presentation at the NAM here in Annapolis.
Thank you.
That I literally sought you out.
Wow.
Not only are you a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, and you've done this for over 20 years. This is your passion. You're all about saving lives.
Yes.
You're also a professor at Anne Arundel Community College, and you are the co-owner of the Work Life Behavioral Health Center in Glen Burnie, and you have created an awesome, powerful program at Pathways, which I also attended. I'm touched right now because I know personally you have helped me, Latoya. You know, we all have issues. You know, the drug problem, the addiction problem, the opioid crisis now is at an all-time high. Many of our young people are dying right here in Annapolis, Glen Burnie. And Latoya, the work that you've been doing for over 20 years really is helping to save lives. So I'm eternally grateful to have you here. Honestly.
And thank you, Argo. And I just have to say that you providing this forum for us to provide information is invaluable to our community. So thank you for doing this.
Well, I tell you, God has a way of bringing people together at the right and perfect time. I believe in divine order and divine timing. Now, let's talk about Latoya, you know, because this really is an upfront and personal interview.
Okay.
So tell us something about your family and about your early childhood, Latoya.
Okay, well, I was born in Wilmington, Delaware, raised in Newark, Delaware, and raised by my mother. I have a sister who's about 1.5 years younger than I am. So I'm the oldest child, oldest grandchild. So I have a lot of memories and experiences growing up that a lot of my younger cousins don't have. You know, I come from a very loving and encouraging family, but just like most families, there was a lot of dysfunction inside of our home and also in our community. I grew up in public housing, so you know, there were many instances of you know, violence and dysfunction, and you name it. You know, I dealt with it firsthand. But I can also say, on the flip side, is that my family was very loving and encouraging, and a lot of great memories to balance the dysfunction.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being so transparent and even vulnerable at this time, because, you know, this is where we touch heart to heart, soul to soul, and our objective with this program really is to touch and educate people and provide an opportunity for health and wellness. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
What were your goals, dreams, and aspirations as adolescent and young adult, and who were some of your role models? Because I know back in the day, you know,
we
always had role models.
You know, well, the short answer is I wanted to be an attorney.
Okay.
But that was probably, you know, as a child, you know, 8, 10 years old, we all want to be a firefighter, police officer, you know, but
school teacher,
an attorney, school teacher,
nurse.
Exactly, right. What we were told who we were supposed to be.
Absolutely.
But for me, I chose an attorney because of my personality. You know, one of the things I always ask my kids is I don't often ask them what they want to be when they grow up. I ask them who they want to be when they grow up.
Okay.
And who I was a very talkative child. I was a very stubborn child. And as a result of those qualities, they did not always work in my favor. So by second grade, my desk was outside of the classroom. And it progressed to in-school suspensions, it progressed to out-of-school suspensions, and
Wow.
ultimately being expelled from 2 schools.
Wow.
Because I was very, just a very stubborn, very assertive, talkative child. But once I, got to a place where I was able to use my words wisely and learn how to communicate and advocate, the social work was a no-brainer for me.
Wow.
It fit who I was, and it allowed me to use those skills to my advantage.
So would you say you always sort of intuitively had a heart for people and
Compassion.
always advocating?
And it's so funny because now you have me thinking about, I had a friend when I was in about 4th or 5th grade, and her parents had recently gotten divorced. And I remember she came to school and she cried because Christmas was around the corner. This was her first Christmas without her father being in the home. And she talked about how her mom had to go back to work and she struggled. So I got a group of my friends together and I said, we need to buy her Christmas presents. We need to, make her Christmas special. So we all bought her, little hair ties, supplies and things. And we took them to her house, and to our surprise, she lived in this beautiful single-family home.
Wow.
And we were like, her house is better than ours. And I remember thinking that, but even still, we gave her the gifts.
Right.
We knew that she was hurting. Even though she, on the outside, it appeared that she had it all, and, we admired her house. But we knew that she was hurting. So my compassion for her situation, it overrode my feelings of wishing that were me or wanting to trade places with her. So I think that that's probably one of the more vivid memories I have of just having compassion for people.
Wow.
And, just putting my heart into helping others.
So most of us generally, when we connect with our passion, our bliss, there's generally one defining moment. Do you have a defining moment that just redirected your whole path?
Wow. Okay. Need to sit through
That's
that
okay.
Well, actually, I'm not. Yes, I do. So when I mentioned to you that I had gotten expelled from 2 high schools.
This was high school?
This was high school.
My.
So prior to being expelled, actually, I was placed in classes for kids with special needs for emotional, intellectual, and behavioral problems.
Okay.
Obviously, my behavior was the problem. It wasn't my intellect. So when my school realized that wasn't enough for me, they had to up the ante, and they sent me to a special school for kids with behavioral problems. So while I was at this school, there was a program where inmates came into the school and they did like a Scared Straight program, some sort of intervention with us. And the inmates began talking about their childhood, and they talked about how they were getting in trouble in school and how it progressed to criminal activity and ultimately incarceration. And as a 14-year-old child, I'm listening to them and I was like, oh my gosh, they're describing me. I'm not that person. I don't want to be that person. And I cried like a baby. And you have these big burly, they were men and women there. And they just grabbed me and hugged me. And that was a defining moment for me to say, you know what? I don't want to go down that path because I saw myself sitting on that side of the table if I didn't do things a different way. So, so that moment just changed my whole thinking, and that was the start of a trajectory of me just being driven, wanting to help others. First help myself, before helping other people. And it was a blessing. That experience was a blessing.
Well, I never heard the story, but your personal story truly have touched, moved, and inspired me today. Because, oh my God, I would have never known that. And so the fact that we have viewers out there, globally now, because we're on YouTube, you're going to touch, move, and inspire some young person today.
I hope so.
That there's hope, and that we all get a moment to choose.
Right.
And
right.
just one choice can change the whole trajectory of your
Absolutely.
entire life. Am I right?
And it absolutely did.
It changed your life.
Did.
So now let's fast forward. Oh, I'm feeling the spirit right now, honestly, because this is a real story. And this is why I am so passionate about this show, because it's upfront and personal. You know, it's not, we're going to get into the nitty gritty about addiction, but you have a very powerful story.
Oh, thank you.
Very powerful story. Let's fast forward to your behavioral health center or clinic in Glen Burnie. What is the mission, and what are the services that you offer there?
So my husband and I started Work-Life Behavioral Health 3 years ago, and we started because he's in medicine, so he's a physician's assistant.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
a social worker, so
Awesome.
I'm primarily mental health and addiction.
Yes.
And we just found ourselves having these conversations over the years about, his clients having cardiac issues, and I'm like, are you sure that's a cardiac issue, or it sounds like it could be a panic attack? And we just kind of started putting the pieces of the puzzle together to say, you know what? If your head gets sick, your body gets sick.
Absolutely.
And just really, the mission of what we do is to help people understand that there's a science behind this. Your head is connected to your body.
Absolutely.
If your head gets sick, your body gets sick. And we all see a primary care doctor, maybe annually, as a preventative measure.
Right.
We all see a dentist, whether it's every 6 months or annually. Why don't we all consider a checkup from the neck up as a priority? Why not?
I like that.
Why not? And for me, it's really about helping people understand the symptoms, understand that these are treatable disorders, and really, using the medical model to, help people treat their symptoms.
Absolutely.
Just for me personally, I have 3 people that I see on a regular basis: my primary care doctor, my dentist, and my therapist.
Right.
Because it's really about encouraging people to look at their overall health.
Absolutely.
And how mental health plays a huge part in who we are overall as a person and how we function in our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. Well, we do know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
There's a mind-body-spirit connection there. And in fact, I interviewed a dear friend of mine, a holistic practitioner in Baltimore, has a wellness center. And she was just stating a few statistics that according to the CDC now, which we all knew way back 30, 40 years ago, that 85% of diseases has an emotional component to it.
Absolutely.
I suffered from severe depression years ago, suicidal when I was in my adolescence, young adult.
Which is common.
And absolutely. And I would say, by the grace of God, my defining moments for me was meeting holistic practitioners and even medical doctors who were very much into the mind, body, spirit. So not only do we treat the body, but we also have to deal with your mind. And so I got into therapy, holistic practices, Reiki, massage therapy, but a lot of counseling and therapy for unresolved childhood issues.
Yes.
And so today we have a crisis, an opioid crisis, a drug addiction crisis that's destroying lives and communities and impacting families negatively. You have created an awesome program at Pathways, and my daughter and I attended. And it was very informative, it was educational, and it is life-changing for many people. Tell us about your program at Pathways.
Okay.
Well,
so,
before we do that,
sure.
let's hone in on the crisis that we're having right now. Do you have any statistics about who's being affected, what age group, especially with the opioids, and what are opioids?
Right. Well, opioids are primarily used as a pain reliever, and unfortunately, what we've seen. And I'm going to back up to the late 90s when I started early on in my career. I don't know if you all remember the commercials that were on television that told you that Percocets and OxyContin were the miracle drug to treat pain. And, from that moment on, people jumped on the bandwagon and they started taking the prescriptions. Doctors were prescribing them freely, let's be honest. which resulted in, once the, there were some limitations to how much you could prescribe, you now saw people wanting to still relieve themselves of pain and achieve that euphoria, and which resulted in an increase in heroin use. But, not only did you see an increase in heroin use, you also saw, families being affected, crime increasing. Unfortunately, you're seeing people that are now being exposed to HIV and hepatitis due to, using needles with infected individuals.
Right.
They had no idea who were infected. So with all of these issues, all of these, systems being affected, now you have a public health crisis.
Right.
Now you have doctors who are now at the forefront of this issue, whereas doctors weren't at the forefront back in the 80s when we were dealing with the crack epidemic. Who was at the forefront?
Absolutely.
The police.
Absolutely.
When we had the DARE prevention program in school, who came in and educated us on addictions? The police. When we had McGruff the crime dog come to the schools and we're singing "Don't Use Drugs" and all of the, they were all done by the police.
Absolutely.
It was their narrative that drove how we dealt with the crack epidemic. There was no HIV with the crack epidemic. There was no overdose with the crack epidemic. There was no health officials or health care providers at the forefront of the crack epidemic.
Right.
So, and even, for example, with, the frying pan and the egg in the frying pan.
Right.
That was what we know about the brain on drugs.
Right.
All we knew is that it fried your brain.
Right.
But what exactly does that mean?
Absolutely.
And now that we have health experts who have now defined addiction as a primary disease of brain reward, memory, and related circuitry being impacted by addictions, now we're approaching it from a medical perspective.
Absolutely.
Now we're treating it like a disease. The way I was educated on addictions in the mid-90s in my undergrad program in social work was not the way I was educated when I went back to take additional courses to become an addiction specialist. So, we have evolved. We have now, gotten more information about how this disease manifests itself, and in our criminal system, in our healthcare system. It affects all our societies as a whole.
Absolutely.
So that was that information is what I explain to people in the family wellness workshop. To help them understand that it's more than a moral issue.
Absolutely.
It's more than
a social issue.
A social issue.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a brain issue.
Right.
So you were so passionate, and I just love your energy, because you educate us, you raise the awareness. What is addiction? What is addiction, and is it a choice or a disease? I know you just said it was a disease, but can you go a little bit more in depth of how the drugs affect the brain? Because I didn't know that. So when you sat us down and you went through that whole thing, and the light bulb went on.
Yeah.
So it's not a social problem.
It's not.
It's not a criminal
problem.
problem.
I'm a bad mother.
Absolutely.
It's not a disease of, where did I go wrong as a parent, or what I could have done differently as a spouse, and, maybe I'm the reason why my husband drinks. It's more to it than that.
Right.
And, how I explain it to people is that, addiction is like an allergy. It's like an allergy. You never know how a substance is going to affect you until you ingest it.
Right.
And some of us, because of our genetic makeup, are more susceptible to our bodies, our brains liking that substance a little bit more than it should. So that's just like the short answer.
Right.
But you're right, the Family Wellness Workshop, it really dives into exactly what it is and how it affects the brain.
Okay.
To give you just another tidbit is that, drugs and alcohol, they go to the survival systems in our brain, that affects our memory, that affects our motivation and drive, that affects our prefrontal cortex, what's our judgment and decision making. So when those areas of the brain are impaired, then you see the social ills.
Right.
Then you see on the outside how a person's behavior
Right, right.
is impacted, but it's really about what's going on internally,
Right.
and the structural changes to the brain as a result of this toxic
Now,
substance.
you know, in this workshop, you talk about the neurotransmitters that our brain makes naturally.
Yes.
But when we are taking any type of drug, it does affect the body's ability to produce the neurotransmitters.
That's correct.
So can you just tell a little bit about that? So because I just want my viewers to understand just how powerful these drugs are and just how it affects our brain, our decision making, our attitude, and our ability to make good decisions.
Right, right. So I tend to use my hands when I explain this because I think it's a little bit easier for people to understand. So our brain produces, these excitatory chemicals.
Right.
So these chemicals pretty much help us be able to function, to be ambitious, to have energy, to be naturally happy.
Right.
So our brain produces those chemicals here, but what happens when you take a drug and alcohol, it produces a surge of those chemicals.
Okay.
So it's going to take you from here to here.
All right.
So you're going to feel even more euphoric. You're going to feel no anxiety. You're going to feel more confident in yourself. All of those feelings, they're all heightened by drugs and alcohol. But your brain then has to create some homeostasis,
Right.
which means that the brain is going to say, you're giving me too much, so you don't need me.
Right.
So then that person comes down from that high, and those chemicals are now here.
Right.
So what do they need to do to now feel that euphoria?
Right.
They need to use more.
Okay.
So the more you use, the less your brain produces those natural chemicals, the norepinephrine,
Right.
the serotonin,
Serotonin,
dopamine, GABA, all of that is affected.
Right.
So the more a person uses, the less their brain naturally produces those chemicals. And now, after a certain while of continued use, your brain is going to be totally reliant on that substance to produce dopamine, serotonin, et cetera, et cetera.
So whether it's alcohol or whether it's crack cocaine or it's
Marijuana,
the
opioids, the brain doesn't know the difference.
It becomes an
The brain
addiction.
doesn't know the difference. Absolutely.
Okay. Let me just share this with you. I had a client, very nice woman in her 50s, retired professional woman. She had back surgery and was on the opioids, right? So it did relieve her of her pain, but of course opioids cause constipation and all kinds of other things. It got to the point when they started reducing her opioids for her pain relief. She literally was so desperate, and she just shared this with me. She went and got some heroin.
Yes.
And then she got hooked on heroin.
Yes,
And so that is a sad commentary right there,
it is.
because
It is.
that's not just one scenario.
That's
that is
a common
happening.
scenario.
That's a common scenario.
It is.
And the woman, she said she was so ashamed to tell her family members, her son, most of them were professionals. She was just so ashamed that she was now hooked on heroin for her pain.
Right.
But that was because of the opioids.
Yes. And I can't even put a face to it. I can tell you that I have seen all demographics. I have seen people from all walks of life.
Yes.
And because of that, it made me feel like, well, you know what? My family's not as screwed up.
Right,
You know?
exactly.
It
It's
actually helped me heal
absolutely.
to see that this is a problem. Mental illness and addiction
absolutely.
impacts everyone. This is the #1 family disease.
Absolutely.
It can happen to all of us.
Right,
Doesn't
right.
matter whether you're 15 or 50.
Absolutely.
It can happen to us all.
Absolutely. What are some symptoms of a drug overdose, and what is Narcan?
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So some of the symptoms is definitely like gray or ashy-like skin. It can be discolored lips, so it can be blue lips. If someone is unconscious,
Conscious, they
obviously,
can't breathe.
Before a person actually becomes unconscious, you'll see it in their slurred speech, slower gait. Those are some of the symptoms that will lead you to think
That they're
this
overdosing.
could possibly be an overdose.
Okay.
So what Narcan does, it reduces it reverses the effects of an overdose. So
Okay.
basically, if you give someone Narcan, it will knock that opioid off of the receptor in the brain. So
okay.
it will wake them up.
Okay.
They won't like it.
Right.
It's not pretty.
Right.
But what it does is it saves their life.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
even if you suspect that it's an overdose, but it actually isn't, the Narcan won't do any damage.
Okay.
So you're better off giving it than not giving it.
Okay, and so Narcan is available,
It is available.
and you get training for it.
Actually, you don't even
really
need
because
you don't even need training at this point. But Anne Arundel County Department of Health, they offer Narcan trainings, I believe, twice a month.
Okay.
So you can go to the training. I believe it's about a 2-hour-long training,
Okay.
and you'll leave with the kit.
Okay.
Many of our libraries in the county offer Narcan training. Some churches. You can even buy Narcan over the counter at a pharmacy.
All right, you have an awesome event coming up, and we only have maybe 5 minutes left in our show. But give the viewers the website where they can check out your wellness program for families at Pathways.
Sure. So the Anne Arundel Health System, so it's aahs.org. And you would just, you can search, or you'll even see a link there for the Family Wellness Workshop. And it's held at Pathways in Annapolis at 2620 Riva Road, twice a month.
Okay.
It's free. It's open to the public. You don't even need to register. You can literally walk in at 8:30, and it's a full-day workshop. There's breakfast and lunch included. Understand this, that attending that workshop raises the chance that your family will be healthier, that you'll appropriately know how to support your loved one who's struggling with the mental health or substance use disorder.
That is an awesome program. I'm encouraging all of you to really check the website and go and hear LaToya. She is an educator. She touches, moves, and inspires, and she will make a difference because you're making a difference in the community now. You have an upcoming event in October, so we want to get that in right now.
So really quickly, I do want to just say that the Family Wellness Workshop facilitators who I've been working with, Shauna Reichel and Mark Secreta. Mark Secreta is our adventure therapist. Shauna Reichel, she is a licensed clinical social worker. They're amazing. So you come and you hear from our different perspectives, and we all just gel together. We work very well together. So we have a great team over at Pathways.
Yes. Now your upcoming event in October the 12th.
Yes. So October 11th.
11th.
Many of you may know it as the Haunted House of Addictions. This is our 3rd year doing the event. It's now called the Human Experience, and it will be held on October 11th at Marley Station Mall in Glen Burnie from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. So we're going to have vendors there. But the cool thing about this event is that they reenact different scenarios. So what does mental health look like in an adolescent? How does, social and emotional issues put a child at risk for experimenting with drugs and alcohol and ultimately leading to progressing to the disease of addictions? So it's free, it's open to the public. I encourage you all to bring it's a prevention program. So I think that it's appropriate for kids, 11 or 12 at the earliest. It can get a little gory. So I would just encourage you all to bring your kids and show them what mental health and addictions look like, but also, giving the information to and resources in order to, recover and get support for those disorders.
Right. So your target audience then would be young people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
Adolescents.
very, absolutely.
Preteens, teenagers.
Absolutely. Well, we've got to use whatever avenues that we can to get the message out and save lives. Any final comments?
Well, again, I just want everyone to understand that addictions and mental health does not discriminate. They are the #1 family diseases, that you're not alone. There's a lot of support out there. The way that we approach mental health and substance use disorders today is far different. This is a collective effort. This is not only the police, this is social workers, this is medical professionals. We're all at the table together, and we just want to save lives. We want to save the next generation.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you, LaToya, for being my very special guest
thank
today.
you for having me.
And-
Thank you so
and-
much, Argo.
and Thank you so much for all the information, and your heart and soul is into what you're doing, and I know that you're making a difference in the community. And truly, it does take a village.
It does,
It
absolutely.
does, it does. And thank you for watching Your Health is Your Wealth. Remember, in this very present moment, we do have the power to take charge of our life and our health. And have an amazing day.